What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JB Sports, back again with another one. Gonna talk a little bit about WBO welterweight champion Terrence "Bud" Crawford, who's been ordered to defend his title against number 2 ranked in the WBO, Sean "Showtime" Porter. Now, the number 1 ranked contender is Vergil Ortiz. He had an impressive performance this past Saturday when he knocked out in the 8th round Igis Kavalauskas, aka Green Machine. I think they ruled that a TKO, but basically dropped the man 5 times. That's pretty much a knockout in my eyes, man. When you drop a guy 5 times and then the referee waves it off, sometimes they'll rule that a TKO because he didn't actually get counted out, but the man was knocked out, man. He didn't want no more. He waved the white flag, couldn't deal with the volume of punches, the ferocity, the power of Vergil Ortiz, and he ultimately got stopped, man. But he put on a strong performance, man. He pretty much did the same thing with Vergil Ortiz that he did with Terrence "Bud" Crawford. Now, he probably had a little bit more earlier success with Terrence Crawford than he had with Vergil Ortiz, but a lot of times, man, when you get in the fight, you take the type of beating that he took in the Terrence "Bud" Crawford fight, that takes a little bit out of you, and you're not the same fighter going forward. And that lends itself to when you fight another top welterweight, you get stopped in a quicker fashion. People are like, oh, Vergil Ortiz stopped him quicker than Terrence "Bud" Crawford. But they don't want to give Terrence "Bud" Crawford the credit of, putting them to that point, putting them in that position where he's not the same fighter. A lot of people say when you leave the ring with, they used to say this about Bernard Hopkins, man. When you fight Bernard Hopkins, the executioner, you ain't the same fighter after you fight Bernard Hopkins. And they starting to say similar things with Terrence "Bud" Crawford. Once you fight Terrence "Bud" Crawford, you're not the same fighter. Once you fought Terrence "Bud" Crawford, you're not the same fighter. You less of a fighter than you was going into that fight with Terrence "Bud" Crawford. So, with that being said, man, we're going to talk about the WBO. They ordered Terrence "Bud" Crawford to take on Sean "Showtime" Porter. Now, Porter has one of the best resumes in boxing. Now, it's kind of funny, it's kind of really don't make no sense with the WBO that he's ranked number 2, and he's the one that is the mandatory. But you remember, they did the same thing with Dominique Brazil and Dillian White. Dillian White was ranked number 1, and I believe Dominique Brazil was ranked number 2, or he might have even been lower than that. It might have been, I don't know, he wasn't number 1. He was either number 2 or number 3, somewhere in that neighborhood, and he was made the mandatory for Deontay Wilder. So these boxing organizations, they do funny things. Y'all understand why Vergil Ortiz was bumped ahead of Sean "Showtime" Porter in the first place. And I heard the reason why he did get bumped up was because he had just defeated Maurice Hooker, who was ranked higher in the WBC than Sean Porter last opponent, which was Baby Formula, aka Formella, who I don't even know he was even ranked in the WBC. I say WBC, I mean WBO. I don't even know if he was ranked in the WBO. Formella. He was the IBO welterweight champion, which is a belt that's like the modern day version of the NABF belt that was back in the day. And I believe I give that belt more credit than I ever gave the IBO. But you had some guys back in the 70s that had the NABF belt. I even think George Foreman had that belt at one time. This was after the Muhammad Ali loss. I think he had that belt at one time. So I give that belt back in the day way more credibility than I ever give the IBO. You had Eddie Hearn out here acting like that was another belt that needed to be mentioned when he was talking about Anthony Joshua, multiple belts that he held. Oh, man, he's a 4-belt holder. He's the WBA, the WBO, IBO, and IBF heavyweight champion. He's a 4-belt division champion. He's out here fighting the best competition in the heavyweight division. And I'm going to do a video about that Ring Magazine heavyweight rankings. I saw that came out yesterday. I saw that on Michael Benson Twitter page. And they got the top 3 right, but they got the wrong order in that fight. But we're gonna talk about that in another video. We're gonna talk about the WBO ordering Terrence "Bud" Crawford and Sean "Showtime" Porter, and will this fight go down? I'm here to tell you that if they don't come to an agreement within 30 days, this fight is not happening. You heard it here first. You heard it here, folks. You understand me? It's not happening. You got to understand that Sean Showtime Porter is a PBC Fox. Let me specify that. Fox broadcast analyst. It ain't no way in hell they gonna allow one of the face of their boxing broadcast to go fight on another platform or another network. Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. So if they don't come to agreement within the next 72 hours, because from what I'm gather, was when they came, I don't know the exact date where they came with the purse bid, but I know it got mentioned on that they ordered it on July 21st. And 30 days from July the 21st is August 20th. That's this Friday. So they got basically 72 hours to come to agreement. Everything that I've been gathering from my sources is they're not close to agreement. It's not nothing like, oh, we just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. They're not that close. They're still in negotiation. The problem is these guys are good fighters, but now one of these guys, to me, are A-side carrier pay-per-view type of fighter. They've never shown that in their career. You know, Sean Porter ain't never been in that position. He was the B-side in the Errol Spence Jr. fight. That fight did, they said that fight did around 350,000 to 360,000 pay-per-view buys. You know, it's kind of some different numbers that came out. When I looked into what the pay-per-view did, I gathered that the fight did 275,000 pay-per-view buys. But then I went back here recently. This is when the numbers had came out right after the fight. They said it was tracking toward 275,000 pay-per-view buys, that being Errol Spence Jr. and Sean Porter. But now when I recently went back and looked at those numbers again, they said it was around 350 to 360,000 pay-per-view buys. So let's just give it somewhere in that ballpark figure of 275,000 to 360,000 pay-per-view buys. What Spence Porter did. That's just gonna give that's a wide range. You know, just say somewhere in the middle of that. But the point I'm trying to make to you is he was the B-side fighter in that equation. And when you look at Terrence Bud Crawford, his two pay-per-views where he was the clear A-side did horrible numbers. Yeah, no, they horrible. That Victor Poster, I don't know if you ever had no pay-per-view did that low. That Victor Poster fight between Terrence Crawford, that thing did anywhere between 50 and 60,000 pay-per-view buys. I can't even recall a fight doing that low of number on pay-per-view. You know, you got these little small, especially on a major platform like HBO. You know, HBO, Showtime, you know, pay-per-view fights on that caliber. ESPN pay-per-view, I never remember the fight doing those low of a numbers. And that's what is very problematic as far as when you're projecting the numbers for Sean Showtime Porter versus Terrence Bud Crawford. And then you got the fact of the purse split, 60% to 40% in the favor of Terrence Crawford, which is better for Crawford, which is better for Porter than the original split would have been. I think it would have been more like 75-25 or 80-20. But the WBO is doing what a lot of these boxing organizations are doing here recently. They're basing their purse split on the revenue each fighter has done in his last three fights. And when they looked at the last three fights of Sean Porter and looked at the last three fights of Terrence Crawford, the money that each fighter generated, they thought that 60-40 was more of a representative of the purse split that each fighter would command going into this particular matchup. So that was a good thing that they did that, because if it had been like 80-20, 75-25, there's no way that fight, they might as well just kill that fight right off the rip. There's no way that fight would have went down, because there's no way they would have been negotiating for Sean Porter to be getting a 25 or 20 purse split in a fight involving Terrence Bud Crawford. There's no way they was going to go for that. And I don't think the fight's going to happen anyway, due to the fact that we're getting down to the finish line as far as the negotiations going. I'm hearing through the grapevine that they're not close. You got basically 3 days, and if the fight does go to purse bid, it's no way in hell Al Heyman or Fox executives are going to allow Sean Porter to go to a purse bid and potentially have to go fight on another platform or another app. Only way I can see they maybe think about going to purse bid where they got inside intel that they gonna win the purse bid. They pretty much know what ESPN gonna bid. They know what Triller gonna bid. They know what DAZN gonna bid. They know that they can pretty much outbid those guys, and they'll be, you know, it's no way they can go into that knowing what is those other entities are going to bid on the fight. If they're going to bid on the fight, and what type of money they're going to bid on the fight. You know, Triller came out of left field with that big-time bid with the Teofimo Lopez-George Cambosos fight. You know Bob Arum wasn't expecting that. You know, even DAZN and Eddie Hearn weren't expecting that. They thought they were going to come in and outbid ESPN and steal a fight from ESPN. Here come Triller. So there's no way that Al Haymon and the PBC is going to chance that. So that goes back to my original statement. If they don't get the negotiations done within the last 72 hours, because I believe August the 20th is the deadline for this fight to get finalized as far as negotiations going between the two camps. If it don't get done by that time, I don't see the fight happening. There's no way, again, that Shawn Porter is going to be allowed, who is the face of Fox pay-per-view fights. Him and the lady, what's the lady last name? Alba. Let me call her Miss Alba. They are the hosts for Fox Boxing, especially on pay-per-view. Now, you talking about regular Fox, you talking about Lennox Lewis and Joe Goosen. Those guys are the boxing analysts for the regular Fox broadcast. But for the Fox pay-per-view, it's Shawn Porter and Miss Alba. Those are the two hosts for that broadcast. That just be the same thing as like Timothy Bradley was a active fighter, and he was ordered to fight Errol Spence Jr., which I think transpired a couple of years ago. And Timothy Bradley went into another direction. He didn't want that fight. But just say that was the scenario that got played out. There's no way in hell that ESPN or Top Rank will allow Timothy Bradley to possibly fight to go to a purse bid, and he had to end up going to fight on Fox or DAZN or Triller. There's no way they're going to allow that. He's a ESPN Top Rank boxing analyst. They would never allow that. They wouldn't even allow Andre Ward. Say he got in negotiations with, he was still fighting. He was ordered to fight, you know, he was ordered to fight, let's say, who's the Super Bowl? Let's see. He was ordered to fight, let's just say Caleb Plant. This is just for the fact that Caleb Plant. And the fight was, they was in negotiations with ESPN and Fox, and they couldn't come to agreement. There's no way in hell, and then they would, and then that fight would go to a purse bid. There's no way in hell the ESPN would allow Caleb Plant. I mean, my bad, wouldn't even allow Andre Ward to possibly leave and go fight on Fox or DAZN or Triller. There's no way they'll allow that when he's part of their ESPN Top Rank boxing team. So that's some of the variables that I think people need to look into when they thinking this fight is going to get done. People are all optimistic. I'm more pessimistic of this fight happening, especially now that we're getting down to the 11th hour of this fight. You know, if they ain't came to agreement in the first 27 days of the negotiations, I find it hard to believe they're going to be able to come to agreement in the last 3 days. But we will see what happens. We will see what transpires. That's just some of the things that I'm hearing in an update as far as Terrence Bud Crawford taking on Shawn Showtime Porter. I hope the deal get done. I hope they pull a rabbit out the hat and get a deal done in the next 3 days. I really want to see this fight. This is the best fight in the welterweight division. Now that Errol Spence Jr. been sidelined with the torn retina, you got Manny Pacquiao facing Yordenis Ugas. That's a good fight, but it's not a great fight. You know, you would like the scenario to play out that the winner of Pacquiao-Ugas fights the winner of Crawford-Porter. We find out who is the top dog in the welterweight division, and that winner later on in 2022, more toward the summertime. Best case scenario, Errol Spence Jr. returns in the summer of 2022. He fights that winner for welterweight supremacy. That would be the best case scenario, but you know how these things go in boxing, man. Boxing fans don't get hardly any scenario things that they want. They get things forced upon them, and they accept it time and time again. That's why they keep getting these type of things and these type of scenarios playing out in boxing. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Let me know your thoughts about Shawn Porter versus Terrence Crawford. Do you think this fight gets over the finish line, or you think it's going to go to a purse bid and they'll allow Shawn Porter to leave the Fox and fight on another platform, knowing that he's one of the faces of the PBC boxing telecast? Let me know your thoughts if you think this fight's going to happen. And let me paint another scenario for you. As far as Terrence Crawford, he got one fight deal with ESPN and Bob Arum. One fight deal. If he goes on the fight on another platform, will that be considered his last fight with ESPN, even though he's fighting on Fox or fighting on DAZN or fighting on Triller? Or will that one fight deal get rolled over till after he goes fight on another platform or another network, and he'll still have to come back and fulfill his last fight on his ESPN Top Rank contract. So you got to look at all these things, all these variables that could be a hindrance for this fight actually taking place. Especially if Terrence Crawford is hell-bent on getting out of his contract with ESPN in his next fight. So we don't know what the language is of the contract, how that plays out if he has to go fight on a network, where that could be considered his still last fight with ESPN. I would think it would be, because Top Rank will still get a percentage, being his lead promoter. It will still get a percentage of the purse. So I believe that will be still considered his last fight up under Top Rank Boxing. So I don't think that'll be a hindrance. But again, Deshaun Porter, closely affiliated, closely allianced with Al Heyman and the PBC on Fox, and being their lead analyst on Fox pay-per-view, is going to play a part in if this fight actually goes to purse bid. It's going to play a part in the sense of urgency of this fight getting done in these next 72 hours, and they come to agreement where it'll be Fox and ESPN doing a joint collaboration pay-per-view fight. But again, if it ain't making dollars, it ain't making sense. How much this fight is worth, and will two TV giants be willing to come together for a fight that's a good fight, a big fight, but not a great fight, not on the magnitude of a Wilder Fury, which enable those two platforms to come together. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Let me know your thoughts, and hit the like and share button, and subscribe to JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend. And I holla.